Hey everybody, welcome back to Oboe Speak. Today we're going to talk about knife sharpening. The knife we're going to look at today is a single beveled knife or a wedge knife. You can see the shape of the knife. If you look at the long end here, we're going to take a look real quick at the scratch pattern. So this is the flat edge where you would sharpen. And as you sharpen for a right-handed scraper, the blade, as you try to take steel off this side, will curl over so you can take material off, kind of like a shovel. You're kind of making a hook out there. And the problem this knife is running into is the scratch pattern on this side, that long flat side. You can see in the camera this kind of slightly lighter or rougher part. And what's happening is that spot right there is not getting sharpened. So I'll draw a quick picture here to show you what's happening. When we have the knife, and this is our point here, this side of the knife is very rough on that one spot. So even if we take that little bit off the top, you can see, well, the knife wasn't sharpened down there. So we've got to make sure we can take all of that material off, just enough that we can really make a clean relief or a clean edge. That way, when we take off material on this side, we have a clean flat edge here to be able to make a burr off of. If we don't have a clean edge to make a burr off of, and we try to take material, that burr is going to reflect that kind of rough, gruff side. So our goal here is to take the knife that has this kind of splotch in the center here and take off a layer of steel from that top angle. Basically, we need to take off all of this material around here. We need to take that down so that the edge will be nice and shiny and clean. The way we're going to do that is we're going to start with a rough stone. And to show you what's happening, I'm going to use a Sharpie. Oop, I better go, oh boy. Let me lean back and get my Sharpie. Oop, there it is. Got my Sharpie. I don't have my big Sharpie. That's somewhere else right now. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to color in that spot in particular so we can see, hey, what's actually going on? Are we getting that to go away? And we can do a little bit up here. This all should go away pretty quickly. And if it doesn't, we'll know what's kind of going on. So I could take the time to do the whole thing. You can do that on your own for your own knife. But I'm just worried about that center spot, really. Now, what I'm going to do is take Shapton Sharpening Stones. These are my favorite stones. They may be a little rough. They haven't necessarily been flattened in a while, so I may have to go back and flatten them. But I'm going to start with the roughest one I have, which is 120 grits, or 120 grit, I should say. And the roughness, it's certainly not smooth. It's got a pretty hefty grit to it. And 120 should scratch this up really something fierce. I've got my trusty little sprayer here, so I'll spray a little water on there. These are not Japanese water stones, so they don't need to be soaked. You just need to have water on there to make sure the material goes away. And what we're going to do is we're going to see how much steel comes off of this knife when we put it down on here flat and take a few passes here. We're going to see, does that Sharpie go away? Does the Sharpie go away the entire spot? Does it only go away on the outer edges? Does it only go away in the middle? We're going to use empirical evidence to find out what's actually happening here. Our goal being to have a flush surface across the entire area. And on this stone, I want to make sure I can get down as far as I can. Before we proceed, I should mention the next stones up I have are a 320, and that will allow us to start to slowly fill in and smooth things out. 1500, which I think for double hollow ground is where you start to get a burr, but it's really not forming very easily. And then 5,000 and then 8,000. These may be different colors than you might find on your wonderful double reed retailer stores, because Shapton may change the colors or on different places. But this 120 is where I'm going to start. And you're going to hear some pretty rough, gruff sounds. So let's, oh, maybe not. This is quite smooth. Oh, that's a surprise to me. Ooh. So I'm quite surprised how smooth this stone reacted to this knife. I would have expected it to really give it the old heave-ho. I may have to refinish this stone. Let's try this side. Quite smooth again. Pretty nice. Let's see if we can get a really nice gruff spot. Part of why I have the camera set up here, I want you to see from my perspective what I'm doing. And even though I'm sharpening flat, you can tell flat isn't always flat. Look at that little divot. Look at that. You can see, even without me wiping it off, how all of that material is very clear and clean, and yet there's a little bit of persisting right there. So even with this 120, I can't believe how smooth this is coming off. That's pretty wild. I'm going to try a different stone. I'm going to use a diamond stone and see if there's any difference in just what I'm getting here, because I'm surprised. I would have expected this to be much rougher. So I'm just going to set this to the side for a moment. This is a little impromptu, but let's see if I can just get something off this thing. That's very interesting. Like I said, I would have expected a really rough, nasty scratch pattern off that 120. I think that stone might need a good refinishing and flattening. Let's try the 320 and see what we get. Just not because it's a rougher stone, but because I would have expected the stone to really eat into that steel and take off that little notch there. So let's, you can hear this is grabbing way differently. I think I just need to refinish that 120 grit stone. So I'm going to put a lot of pressure and try to really focus in on the center of the knife. So I'm going right to left. Oh my. Well, that's not, that's not going to be so good. Let me poke that back on there. Let's see how we're doing here. Let me get a little paper towel here. So I kind of jumped right into this, but my goal is, can I get that little notch to clear out? We're making some progress. The Sharpie's gone. It's pretty flat, but I want to make sure the burr, wow, this is fascinating. I can feel the burr here escape. So I'm taking steel off this side of the knife, and almost like water trying to escape the back of the knife. As I sharpen here, the burr, the edge of the knife, starts rolling over. And I can feel, maybe you can hear that, it's kind of grabbing here. And it's grabbing a lot at the back. One of the tests you can use is using your 3 fingers, kind of petting the knife. And I can really feel a lot of steel back here, but not much, or not as much. So let's keep going this way and see. Now, there is an outlook that on a knife like this, you really wouldn't want to have to sharpen this side, but this knife has received quite a bit of work on the back side of the knife, you could call it. And so what I want to make sure is that the student doesn't have to return to that side, and it can be nice and clear for them. They've already spent about 2 or 3 hours trying to sharpen this knife down and refinish it. And so I want to make sure that I can help them along and see if I can't get them over the edge on this knife. Now, what's interesting is you can see, even in the camera here, this kind of wear pattern of steel and stone kind of coming off. And my assumption is because there's more steel on this side of the knife, so I'm really having to grab down in there. And already, look at, oh, hey, that's looking a lot better. Wow, I'm surprised. Now, you can still see, it almost looks like a watermark, but you can see it's starting to really look shiny across, which again, I didn't expect it to quite work like that. So let's put a little Sharpie on there, just to get some visual evidence of what's happening. And so the stone doesn't wear down, because ceramic stones do wear down, and we do need to flatten them. And while I'm letting that Sharpie dry out a little bit, this is one of the lapping plates that you can use. It's an iron lapping plate. You'll see some surface rust on here, and you use some lapping powders that flatten the stones up. Let's see if we have gotten that little center out just with that little bit of work, recognizing that this stone was kind of taking off material a little better than the other one. Let's see what we get. Well, Sharpie's gone. But look at that stain right there. I think that's interesting. I want to really make sure I've gotten this knife completely cleared out. But actually, I can feel the burr coming through there. That's quite nice. I mean, the burr it's present. So what I might do is, instead of going after this side right now, I'm going to go to the other side and try to see if I can't just knock that burr back a little bit. And I'll put the same finish on both sides. One of the things that I'm doing this on this side, what I'm trying to do is make sure that I'm not putting a curve in the stone. What's funny is I can feel this stone starting to dish, where as I go right about to here, I can feel right between these two spots, the stone is kind of dipping down a little bit. And that's why we have those lapping plates, is to flatten the stone. You may say, well, why would you buy stones that warp? And buying stones like this allow you to cut very fast, cut through the steel. And part of that is because the stone is breaking down and the material is cutting the steel. The steel is getting slurried up with the compound from the stone, and it cuts very, very quickly. And you kind of have this balance where it doesn't cut the stone doesn't break down as quickly as like a Japanese water stone, like you'd see like a yellow water stone. So you're trying to get the best of both worlds. It cuts fast, but it's not too hard to maintain. And you can always have that fresh edge. Now I can kind of feel, you heard it kind of dipping back and forth on here. So this knife is trying to run away from me a little bit. Oop, it's trying to come out of the handle too. But we're not going to let it. So that's looking pretty good here. We got a nice scratch pattern. It's looking pretty even on this side. And we'll see as the burr going the other way. Now what's interesting is I can feel, so since we were sharpening on this side, the steel is trying to curl over, or eventually should, and I can feel a giant burr right here. That is my fingernail catching and curling, where here, you don't hear anything. So again, clearly plenty taken off on the backside there. So let's keep going on this front side to see if we can get that burr to form. I still think the reverse side is really where the problem is with this particular knife. So I'm going to try to really make sure that we bring the point home on this one. I'm going to get into the front of the knife here. And I can certainly feel it now a lot more on that side. So I think we're getting very close. I'm going to just do a few, just maybe not minutes, but just a little longer on this side and see what we can see here. And see if we can get this to kind of flatten out. I'm a little curious about the kind of flat angle of this knife. If we were to put it on a straight edge, you know, would the knife be flush? And even though this isn't the best straight edge in the world, you can kind of see how it lifts up in the back there. There's a little angle down there. So that knife kind of has the flatness of the flat of the knife. This primary edge, it kind of is sharpened at two angles here. So we're going to watch out for that. But my primary goal right now is the front, well over 2/3 of the knife. I think this back part of the knife previously had been kind of sharpened up and in a little too far. And if I were to make this side equal these sides, I'd have to take out all this material down to that point. And right now, I'm not necessarily interested in doing that when we have all this nice steel over here we can use. So again, I'm going to go back to this side. I'm going to switch the stone around. But essentially, we've done the shaping component of getting a knife into good order, where we're taking off material to make sure that we are ready to sharpen it. And then we can hone it, whether on a single beveled knife, that would be using a strop, or just stones by themselves. So again, I'm just going to try to focus in on the front edge here, because so much has been taken off in that back edge. And though I'm trying to be flat, what I'm really trying to do also is make sure that I'm dragging the knife with the pressure down towards the front of the knife. Even though it's flat, flat is relative. I'm going to kind of try to, well, keep the handle from falling off. I'm going to try to bring the angle of the knife ever so slightly forward to make sure that I'm trying to remove material right from that front edge. And you can see this kind of gray slurry building up here from the steel and the stone. Well, it certainly looks a lot better than it did before. I think what we might do now is move from the 320. It's got a little extra material. Move from the 320. We'll move up to a 1500. Throw the Sharpie on there, and let's see if we can smooth this down. Now, I'm going to describe to you what, in essence, is about to happen with this knife. And you might say, well, why are you going to go from a 320 to a 1500? Why wouldn't you just go straight to the 1500? Well, imagine that the 320 stone is kind of rough. And we're going to take the 1500 grit stone, and let's say the stone is coming down this way, and it has a finer grit. When we bring that 1500 grit stone down, it's going to start to take layer by layer by layer off, and our goal is to get the layer to be flush with the ground of the knife. So this looks like this. The problem is, if you start, let's say you started with a very rough knife, and then you said, I want to go to 1500 right away. Well, if you have a very rough knife and you put this down there, it's going to take you forever. You'd be better off starting with a rougher stone so that when you place the stone on the knife and place it down, you can start to get an even formation of the steel before you go towards a finer and finer gradation. So you can imagine if the steel is very rough, you need a rough stone to be able to go in and cut off those peaks. And then you can take a finer stone and a finer stone and a finer stone until you have, if you want it, a mirror polish. And so now what we're going to do is change up the scratch pattern by taking this knife and placing it on a 1500 grit stone. And you could think of grit as like sand. So if you had a 1 grit stone, it might just be like sand, like play sand. And that's pretty rough. And so as you go up the grit gets smaller and smaller. So we're going from 320 to now this is 1500. And you can feel here by my hand being on this stone, it's got a much smoother finish on it. So let's put a little Sharpie on here so you can see with your eye and without a microscope what's going on here. It's really fun to get a microscope and take a look here. You know, you can buy just even a cheap $35, $45 microscope you plug into your computer, and it'll give you a good result on what's going on with your knife and really the scratch pattern. So you can see the kind of shimmeriness of this scratch pattern. It looks shiny here, but let's see how much shinier it gets when we place on this stone. Now, as it starts out, it'll be a little rougher, and it will start to smooth out a little bit. Oop, a little bit of gunk there. Well, even though it's got a little bit of staining right there, it looks like it's pretty flat across the blade. So there's some other things we could do to double check that. But for now, let's go a little further until we have this kind of smoothed out. Because obviously the Sharpie was gone within not too many strokes. I'm going to rotate this. So, I mean, gosh, it doesn't look unblemished, but it's starting to look even smoother. Let's see if you can see me waving from behind the camera. Hello. And this side is now blacked out, so let's try to see maybe in just one stroke what happens. So interesting. With that one stroke, you can see I didn't quite get to the edge there. So let me put a little extra pressure on the front edge and make sure that I'm getting to the front edge of the knife there without lifting the angle. Well, that certainly got it. And you can see a little bit of Sharpie up here. I didn't wipe it off. Up in the corner there, a little Sharpie, and a little bit in the back corner. I'm trying to avoid that. So it took it off pretty well. And actually, there's a nice little burr there. That's impressive. I'm quite pleased with that. I think just putting that little extra pressure in the right spot got that little divot in the front to go away. You might say, why is he sharpening the front of the tip of the knife the middle of the knife and the back. Why is he doing that? To me, even though the knife is flat, sometimes you want to take a little more material off the tip of the knife or the middle of the knife or the back of the knife. And so where you sharpen and how you sharpen is relative. You'll get there eventually, but sometimes you want to focus your strokes on specific parts of the knife. So we've gone on both sides, but just for due course and to make sure this knife is just the way we want it, I'm going to go in and go back on this flat relief side. Just make sure I've got all the material taken away that I need to before I move into a 5,000 grit stone, because 1,500 to 5,000 is a pretty big leap, and we're getting up to a mirror polish here. And so I want to make sure this knife is nice and ready. And actually, it's starting to feel slicker. Remember when I drew that picture, I drew those big notches. Well, this finer stone is no longer scratching on the top of those little mountain peaks. It's getting flatter and flatter. It's taking those mountain peaks and turning them into plains, turning them into smooth, open pastures. And that's what we want. And so it's got a nice, smooth, fluid thing. I don't know what's going on with this little mark in here, but it seems flat to me. So it's kind of interesting. I wonder if that's part of the steel when it was formed or just some staining somehow. I'm not sure. It's my name, David. Hello, David. Kind of looks like that a little bit. D. There's the D there. A. There's a D on the end, maybe. I don't know. Maybe someone wrote their name on there and it's just tattooed inside the knife. But we're just about, I think, we're just about there. I'm going to do a final stroke on the front edge here before we move to the 5,000, because as I said before we went from the 320 to the 1,500, I said, gosh, we're going to try this 1,500 and see how long does it take us to smooth out this edge and get the scratch pattern to reflect that 1,500 grit, and it seemed to do a pretty good job. So we're going to keep going to the next stage. So we're going to move past I'm going to put away the 320. I'll clean those up later off camera. Put away the 1,500. Now we're going to throw out a 5,000 grit stone. And again, I haven't cleaned these up for a little while, and always be careful. Somebody gave my poor little pink stone here a little kiss on the ground, and it took a nosedive. So we want to be careful because they're very durable, but they are brittle. They are ceramic. So here we have a 5,000 grit stone, and I mean, this is very smooth. It's not quite glass, but it's quite smooth. So let's do the Sharpie thing. Why not, huh? We got it here. And the reason I do the Sharpie is I want you to see when I sharpen this, is it actually flat? Is all of that material going to get taken away? Is all of that marker going to disappear? If it does, well, at some point at least, it is pretty flat. So let's do this relief side and really get a nice mirror. And actually, you can see a little bit of the marker kind of coming off of there. So what's interesting is it came off pretty quickly, but you can see these little divots up in the corner, up on the top of the knife, right by that primary edge. Let's see if we can get those to go away. This knife is feeling a little rough. It doesn't like that Sharpie on there. It's kind of bumping up against it. It feels kind of rough, kind of funny. So it's kind of skating on top of the stone. It's not really digging down into it. And I equate that to when I'm sharpening on here, the stone is so fine that it hasn't really dug down into the meat of the steel. We're still getting those peaks and valleys from the 1,500 grit stone to come down. And interestingly enough, though the Sharpie is gone, what I see, you can actually see it right there. See how this is kind of rougher right there? I was putting more pressure towards the top of the knife, so the back of the knife, the scratch pattern is a little duller. There's a little bit of a dark, it's not shiny. You can see the light is not beaming down right in there. So even though it was flat and the marker came off, the back of that knife wasn't sharpened flat enough. So I'm going to go in here and instead of drawing towards me, not at an angle necessarily, I'm just pressing more firmly. I'm going to press a little bit towards the back of the knife, and we'll see if we can't even out that spot, so then we can bring the spine at the top of the knife with the primary edge of the knife together. Make sure they're both flush and flat and happy. Let's see how we did here. Well, we're getting closer. It's fun. It's funny to me because now if you look, you can see there's that little smudge we talked about, but look behind it. You can see the light is now shining behind the smudge, but there's still a smudge there. And let's, oh, look, there's our friend. He's been waiting for us. There's that smudge we originally were talking about. Let's see if we can get that to go away at the 5,000 grit here. And I mean, I do feel the burr coming through, so it's there, but I don't think that's just an anomaly. I think that's real. Or I should say, I think it's affecting the scratch pattern of the knife, because the way it's not reflecting there, that is very suspect. That could have been from some damage when it was being sharpened in a particular way. I don't know. But we're going to see what we can do. So we're 25 minutes in. Exciting, I know. This is part of why knife sharpening is so important. It's not just that the knife just magically does what we want, because if you send this knife on a journey away from where it started, it'll go far, far away and come back transformed. And we don't want it to go and be that different in this case. And so we're trying to bring it back to kind of a standard operating order. Oh, look at that. Look how, see, it's just kind of floating now. It's kind of reaching a point of smoothness on this stone that it doesn't really have much of a resistance on it. This side over here has resistance, but let's see if we can get that one spot to kind of give up its roughness and be a little smoother for us. Making a mess. Sorry, desk. There we go. Well, I'd say it's starting to get better. You can see that little triangle now, almost, or like a very isosceles triangle, is starting to go away. Oh, and look at this. That shine of the light, I mean, it's starting to shine through that blemish a little bit. Very interesting. And the burr is very nice across the back of the knife. That seems like it's doing its job. It's clear. I mean, when we go to the 8,000, oh, you can, there's the camera lens. Wow, see, we're making a mirror here. And that mirror is going to be on the edge of the knife. Let me see if, yep, there's the camera lens here. I guess I can't, I'm somewhere back there. So I'm behind the camera somewhere. Let's see here. Oh, there I am. Hello. So I think we're pretty good right there. We'll switch over to the 8,000 in a moment. But for now, why don't we take off this Sharpie on this side? You notice I'm not using a lot of terminology at this stage. I'm just going to show you a simple kind of shaping of this knife. And we're really moving into the sharpening process where we're starting to remove steel off to make sure that the burr is forming on both sides now that we got that blemish off. And the personalizing of the burr will come a little later if we use a leather strop or maybe some compounds. Now, again, as I'm talking to you, I'm feeling this knife kind of dancing around and kind of bumping like an all-terrain vehicle. And that's because I'm starting to get this knife roughed into place. And then slowly it's starting to smooth out because all of the surfaces are starting to meet together. And we'll see if that Sharpie is there. That Sharpie is gone. Or at least I think it is. We don't have a microscope on the tip of the knife, but the burr is going forwards. And if we have it flat going down this way, the burr is going to try to escape like water and curl over on this side. Our goal is that we don't have to sharpen any side but the one that I have down now for a right-handed knife, because the straight side of the knife here will be perfectly clean and sharp. And all we have to do is take off a little material on this angled side and it reveals burr, and we should be in sharp knife land, which is where we want to be. So I'll do this for just a moment longer, and then we'll switch over to the 8,000 grit stone, and I think we'll be home free. Hopefully have a nice burr on this knife, and it'll be ready to go back to students' hands and make nice reeds with. And I'm going to move to the 8,000 grit stone just to make sure we can get a really nice finish on this thing, especially on that flat side. So it's not as flat as I would like. I can see a little bit of gradation change, but you can see the camera lens again. If you're looking right inside here, you can see the camera lens. That's how mirror finish this is. And when I test it on my thumbnail, I can feel the burr all the way up and down, which is very nice. It's not too long. It's got a good length to it. So I'm gonna move on to the 8,000 grit stone. and see if that takes very long at all. But it really shouldn't. This is going pretty well. And then we'll see if we have a burr across the entire stone. So here's my 8,000 grit stone. And the only reason you can hear anything is because there's a little bit of like detritus on it, but it's pretty smooth. A little water on there. There we go. And hey, let's try that Sharpie again. Why not? Let's make sure we're sticking with the plan here so we can see if all that material is coming off. And I'm not going to go crazy here. Just get a little bit on there. I like those big Sharpies. Those are the ones you make a couple strokes and you get the whole knife. But they're my other bag. Okay, let's go on the flat side and see if we can mirror this off. The Sharpie's gumming up the works here. You can see it kind of building up on the stone over here. And I have to be careful because sometimes the stone can be a little chalky. And so just like a leather strop, if you cut it the wrong way, you'll cut into the stone. Now what's interesting is you can kind of see it's got a mirror on it, but you can see how it's kind of scratchy. The mirror doesn't look refined. And I equate that to, though the Sharpie came off, and there's a tiny bit little left on the edge, that Sharpie came off, but the scratch pattern has not gone down. And actually the knife feels wet, you could say. The smoothness is glass-like. It no longer feels like metal. It feels like a glass or a different type of material. It doesn't feel like wrought iron or steel. It feels so smooth. Oop, I went to the other side. Whoops. So I accidentally went to the other side. I was having so much fun sharpening. I was up. And what's really cool about now that I've done that, this is a great test for the microscope. If you look at the edge, you might say, oh, all the Sharpie's gone. But students who have used the microscope would look really closely. And you too can see, look at the edge of the knife here. You can see a little black line right on the edge. You can see this kind of little dimpling almost. I'm going to try to get the light really up in there. See if I can see it on the camera with you. There it is. See that little haze of black right there? You can see the indent of my finger. That shows how fine this stone is, that we weren't really reaching the edge of the knife. And so I'm going to try to keep going here and see if we can't get that mirror polish all the way through. And now we're starting to get a lot better here. The mirror is getting a little smoother. And let's go to this side and make sure we clean this off too, as well. This little handle keeps coming off. Right? Gonna need a full tang handle on this thing. Now that scratching sound, the back of the knife has got a little bit of material taken off and chonking away. And so I think that's just kind of building up on the corner of the stone, which wears down the stone, but them's the breaks. You gotta get this stone, this knife nice and smooth here for my fantastic student. So I'll keep going in here, and I'm just kind of squirreling around here, making the knife nice and sharp here, and make sure it's nice and smooth. So you can, even in how my scraping motion's going through, you can tell how smooth things are kind of coming through. It's just kind of skating and gliding along the stone. Oh yeah, that's starting to look a lot shinier. This is a great example of where sometimes in reed making or knife sharpening, looks can be deceiving, but at least in this case, the looks are reality. If it looks like a pure mirror all the way across, it's a pure mirror all the way across. What do you want? Now, I will say what I had been concerned with from the very beginning was this little divot up in the front here, which is now gone. But what I see, and even as I move, there's a little hazing at the top millimeter, you could say, right up here. Just a little bit of haze up there, just right about there. If I push too hard, I'll cut myself because this knife is so sharp right now. And that I want to get rid of that. That is my primary concern with this knife. It's really not this cutting edge going out here. It's this flat relief. I want that to be a pure mirror finish all the way through. And the reason is because when we do sharpen the angled side, and we reveal the burr, we want that burr to be made up of material that's very fine, very smooth. If it's not, well, then we'll have a rough burr and the knife won't function properly. So I want to make sure I can really be sure that the front edge of that back of the knife is just as smooth as every other part of it. So let's see if we can get it there. Very exciting, I know. I'll have to make an ASMR knife sharpening video. This is me sharpening the knife. Now I'm just showing off. This knife is really starting to feel nice and smooth. I mean, it's got to be pretty mirrory by now. That looks pretty good. Again, it's a little not stained, but you can see it's not mirror polished. It probably, if I went up to a 15,000 or 30,000 grit stone, I could get there. But I think for our purposes, I mean, the burr, that's a very nice burr going backwards, or going against the cutting edge. So now that I've accomplished that, I'm going to put the burr forward, and we'll see if we have a reed knife that scrapes. And we'll get a reed and test it out. See if we can just get a nice, easy burr. Now, I just noticed that this side of the stone, if you look in there, there's a little bit of extra green. The hilt of the knife back here, the bottom of the blade, is starting to grab down into the stone. And so to protect my stone and to wear out the outer edges where I scrape less, I'm going to put this into the outer edge here and try to use the shape of the stone getting worn less on the outer edges to take off that extra material that I was just noticing coming away. My goal with this is to put the burr forward and hopefully be done with the maintenance sharpening of this knife and see if we can't get it into shape. And the stone's getting a little dry, so we'll switch over to here. And if you want a different angle, or you want to know something specific about what I'm doing or anything I'm using, or want me to try using a different technique or idea, please let me know in the comments. I'll be happy to give it a whirl and make a video showing what happens. Ooh, oh boy. There goes that shirt. I got a little bit of knife splash on me. Oh boy. Oh well. That's why they made laundry machines, I guess. Okay. So, let's wipe this off. We're looking pretty shiny. Okay. And we have burr. I mean, that's a nice burr. I do the test on my fingernail where I'm just dropping the knife to see is the burr going forward. Some people that don't like using their nail, they can use like a plastic pen. This is a little plastic Sharpie. It does the same thing. Let me see here. What do I have? This is one of my students was working on tying a reed. And so, whoop. Well, it's going to be hard to scrape with that side. I probably could. It's pretty sharp. But, oh, very nice. Oh, you can't see that. Let me see if I can show you what's going on here. I mean, that is quite the verm. That thing is cutting beautifully. See there? I guess you can't see all the goodness here. Let me see if I can angle you up. Oh boy, there we go. Let's see if that does you any better. Oh boy, I need my other stand for this. Well, I'm good at schwamping the reed right in half when I'm looking through the camera like that. But needless to say, it has a very nice burr on it and is doing exactly what we'd expect a knife to do. Most importantly, as we set out, the goal was to take that little blemish and make it go away. And in just a few short 40 minutes of knife sharpening, I think we got it to go away. Though there is a slight, well, you can barely see it. There's a slight blemish. Oh, there's me. Now you can see me really well. Hi. How many fingers am I holding up? 1, 2, 3, 4. You can see how much smoother the steel is. and you can kind of make out a little bit of that relief of those marks we were talking about. But I think the front edge of the knife is now much, much better, much, much smoother. There is a burr there all the way across. And if we were, let me get my strap. Here's one of the leather straps you can look for. And this one has a jeweler's rouge on this side, the red side, and this one's just bare leather. And so I'm going to put it on the bare leather side. I'm going to wipe it off so I don't get any of that guck on my nice strap here. So there's my strap. There's me. And I'm going to put it, up and personal with my hand over there. So I'm just going to leave it flat. And to me, it put a very nice little extra oomph on the end of the burr. And it gave just that little extra grab to kind of smooth it out. That's actually what I like to see when I'm using my double hollow grind knives. So I'm really impressed with what that did. Sorry that's not in focus. But I really like the way that burr is grabbing. I think it's nice and smooth. It's got a nice cut to it. So, in summary, we took this knife and we checked the shape of it, and the shape had a big divot, right? Or not a big, but a sizable material that was causing the tip of the knife not to be able to form a burr. So we went and backed down to a lower grit. My 120 grit wasn't really grabbing the way it is, and I'll probably make a video in a moment about me using a stone to flatten the knife, but I think the great thing is we went from that rougher stone up. We proved every time that we were flattening it out. We used the Sharpie, and we got up to 8,000. If you wanted to go higher, you could. But this is a really functional knife, and for basic maintenance, you could use a strop with some jeweler's rouge. Sometimes people use the green stropping compound. But you have a lot of options in how you can customize the burr. And when the knife wears down, which I'll make a video more on a little later, when that wears down, go back to your stones, take off just enough steel so that you can reveal the knife, that edge that you need. And then you're going back to scraping again. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, please go ahead and ask. Again, this is Dr. Cyzak with Oboe Speak, sharpening a single beveled knife. And I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.